Comparing the ball python market to the stock market is incredibly common, but I think that there are 4 common traps that new breeders fall into when they try to bring their investment expertise to the ball python breeding world. First trap that we're going to talk about is misunderstanding how prices work in the ball python industry. So when it comes to stocks over time appreciate in value, and while they may go down in specific instances or just day to day or throughout a long period of time, in general, for successful companies, the stock is going to appreciate as those companies grow, and therefore, even if you buy now, eventually the price is going to be higher as long as you hold the stock long enough, and therefore it can be a safer investment. But when it comes to ball pythons, this is the exact opposite. Instead of ball python morphs and ball python projects appreciating over time, in general, they are going to depreciate. And the reason why they do this is that as more supply is created in any given project, that means that there's going to be more people selling that morph, selling that project on the market at any given time, and the demand for that morph and the demand for that project is going to go down over time, because once people are interested in it and they buy their own animals, they don't need to buy as many animals in the future. So what this does is it creates a situation where the price of a ball python project generally is the highest as early as possible. And then as it gets more and more stability and more people get into that project, the price falls. So I think that it is really common for people to come into the ball python breeding world, buy an animal, and while they understand that the prices are going to fall consciously, when they see the actual price fall over 2 or 3 years, it can be a gut punch and it makes them want to get out. But they are misunderstanding how you make a return in the ball python industry, and instead they are only looking at the value of the animals that they bought and not looking at the value of the clutches they're going to produce. Trap number 2 that gets a lot of people is that they look at a gene like the sunset morph, which is our favorite morph in the ball python breeding industry, as something like an individual company. So let's say that you are taking the idea that the sunset project overall was like Apple, and while the sunset project might be really in demand and therefore Apple might be really hot and going up in value, it is also possible for the sunset project to go down, and therefore it would be equivalent to Apple's stock going down. But I think that this is really tricky, because while there is some similarities between a project and a stock, when you are buying ball pythons, you are not just buying a project, you are buying an individual animal. And while somebody could have an Ultramel Sunset, that is one of the most hyped combos in the ball python breeding industry right now in the spring of 2025, it's also possible that somebody could have a Spider Sunset, which is probably one of the least in-demand combos in the Sunset project right now in 2025. And while both of them are in the Sunset project, you could have wildly different success when it comes to the return for investing in either one of those animals. And if you were going to apply this to stocks, this would be like, instead of having one Apple stock, you had a stock for iTunes and the App Store and iPhones and Mac, and you had to understand exactly which one of those specific Apple products were the best thing to invest in. And it could be possible that you could invest in one Apple product that gets discontinued the next year and you're out your entire investment. But just like animals, you could buy an animal that passes away unexpectedly, and then your entire position and the project is gone, even if the overall project is doing well. Trap number 3 might be a little bit controversial, and that is diversification. So, in the investment world, diversification is one of the best strategies that you can use as an investor, because in general, if you are picking companies from, let's say, something like the S&P 500, they are successful companies that are going to continue to grow over time. So if you diversify your investment across all 500 companies, it's very likely that over time you are going to get a positive return, because in general, all of those companies are growing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made it into that index to begin with. But when it comes to the ball python world, as we've already talked about, ball python morphs, ball python projects as a whole are decreasing in value over time. So if you diversify too much in the ball python world, what can happen is that the majority of the projects that you invested in are worth less money over time, and therefore the majority of your assets are losing value. But the kicker on this is that when it comes to the ball python breeding world, it is super important to reach critical mass in specific breeding projects, so that way the animals that you are producing are better than anything else that's on the market. And if you're too diversified, it can be really, really hard to reach that critical mass because you just don't have enough animals in any one project to really reach it. And in addition, if you have that critical mass, you can go out and buy one male and leverage, let's say a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 investment in that one male and put him to several females that work well with his genes because you built yourself up right. But again, if you're too diversified, maybe you could go out and buy that one male, but rather than having 4, 5, or even 10 females to put him to, you might have 2, in which case it's going to be harder for you to gain steam. So for these reasons, I think that people who come into the ball python hobby with the idea that they are going to diversify in order to make it a less risky investment are actually setting themselves up for disaster later on. The last trap that we need to talk about is the idea of passive versus active investments. So when it comes to the investment world, when it comes to stocks, when it comes to mutual funds, generally the idea is that you purchase it and then you forget about it. And then hopefully years later you come back and you realize that it has appreciated significantly and you have earned a return on it. But when it comes to the ball python world, you can't just forget it. One, trends change over time. So you need to understand what the market wants and what's in demand for the market to plan your breeding projects accordingly. In addition, there's so much work required just to care for the animals, let alone to sell them. You need to be active on social media. You need to be active in the community. And when it comes time to producing babies, you are going to have to be spending weekends away from your family, vending shows, selling these animals, and it can be really, really tough. It 1000% isn't a passive investment. Instead, when you are buying into the ball python breeding hobby, you are essentially starting a business, even if you aren't intending to get to the point where it is your full-time income. And if you're not willing to grind the way that you need as if you were starting a business, it's very likely that you're not going to be able to sell the animals fast enough. You're not going to be able to sell them for the prices that you thought you were, and ultimately, if you're coming in this with an investment mindset, you likely are going to get out of the hobby before you get anywhere close to earning the return that you initially expected. So with all of this said, there is a lot of parallels that you can bring from the investment world into ball pythons, but you still have to be very, very careful because snakes are not stocks and they don't function the exact same way. Anyways, we hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, but we will see you next week.